Welcome to the Hud Grad Club. I'm Chris Webb, and I'm the Alumni Engagement Career Consultant with the University of Huddersfield's Careers and Employability Service. And, full disclosure, I'm also a University of Huddersfield graduate. So I've generally got pretty positive things to say about both the institution and any of our graduates. But don't take my word for it. In this podcast, we'll be meeting different members of the University of Huddersfield's global alumni community, finding out what makes them tick, about their experiences during their time at the university and their career journeys since completing their studies. Join us as we explore the inspiring, innovative and diverse range of individuals that make up the Hud Grad Club. Hello and welcome back to the podcast. We're joined by another member of our fantastic University of Huddersfield alumni community. So Anna-Line, welcome to the podcast. Can you introduce yourself for people who maybe haven't met you before?
Sure. Thanks, Chris. Thanks for having me. So I'm Anna-Line. I am originally from France, as you can maybe hear. I was a student at Huddersfield in 2007. I did a bachelor in international business, and I loved it so much that I came back 2 years later to do a master's in marketing. And I now work in education. I work for the apprenticeship provider Multiverse, where I have the pleasure of working in the team that supports our learners who have additional learning needs.
Oh, fantastic. Bienvenue, Anna. Bienvenue. You can tell I've not been working on my French since we last spoke. So fantastic. Yeah, great to kind of have you on the podcast. So as always, we start each podcast kind of going back to where it all began. So with our section we call the greatest Hud story ever told. We want to find out a bit more about your time at the university. So I guess, first of all, how did you end up at the University of Huddersfield? How did you make that decision to kind of come to the university from France?
So I was studying in a business school back in Paris, and there was a partnership with the University of Huddersfield, and so we could choose from a variety of different universities around the world. And I guess I picked Huddersfield because there was a full year degree which I really liked, and that was in the UK, and it just seemed really authentic. A few of my colleagues went to London, some went to Preston, Bristol. But yeah, I just really like the curriculum of the program. So yeah, that's how I came.
Oh, brilliant. And in terms of your Hud story, so your kind of top memory or best memories of your time at the university, what have you got to share with us?
So it is really hard to pick. I would say holistically, any kind of people interaction. By the time I went to the university, I hadn't traveled much. I hadn't met a lot of people, and just getting to meet this community from the UK but also from around the world was just brilliant. And yeah, within that, so many nice memories from obviously the parties. There is an amazing nightlife, but something that I should have probably told my parents more about, even the late night at the library, trying to wrap up an exam. Yeah, those were brilliant. The graduation as well was amazing. That was just brilliant. So yeah, really the people and the people you could meet, and yeah.
And I know we sort of spoke before about kind of languages, adapting to different language. And how did you kind of find that experience sort of coming up to, I guess, a part of the UK as well, where the accents are quite different from London, which is where I think you're based now?
Well, it certainly took a bit of adaptation, because also the way we grew up learning languages, at least in France, at least in my time, that wasn't really made by an actual English-speaking person. So yeah, coming in Huddersfield, trying to have people understanding me, that was a bit of a challenge, and also getting around understanding the accent. But once you understand,
Mm.
what people mean with certain words, and also there are some expressions that we're not acquainted with, like this is the first time ever I was being called love, which I love but with a passion, or like flower. Oh, do you want anything else? Flower. Love that. So yeah, felt very welcome despite the language.
Yeah, I love that. And it is actually, to be fair, that's very similar if you come from other parts of the UK. Like often you'll never hear that expression until you come to other parts of the UK. So it's really interesting. So I mean that's great. And I mean I'm right in saying that you enjoyed your time here in the UK so much that you decided to make it permanent and now sort of a based here for work as well.
Yeah, exactly. And that's actually, well, I remember this day I was taking a trip with a group of friends from a group of friends from the university. We were traveling down to London, and I remember coming out of the hostel in the morning, walking in the street and being like, I really want to live here one day. And yeah, it took me a few years, but eventually made it. So yeah, it's been 8 years now, living and working in the UK. I am a proud British citizen as well now. So yeah, really pleased about it all.
Oh, well, it's great to have you. And I mean, in terms of that transition, tell us a little bit more about that. So you mentioned obviously it wasn't a kind of sort of straight linear journey from finishing the degree to kind of getting to where you are now. So what was that kind of journey like for you from sort of finishing your studies and then kind of moving through those early stages of your career?
So it certainly wasn't a straight line. So I kind of
Mm.
knew what I wanted. I was really keen on coming back to the UK, as I said, and working in this international environment. So straight after graduating from university, came back home, came back to my parents, tried to look for a job abroad, but that proved tricky. Tried to look for a job in Paris, but that proved tricky as well. But
Mm.
I found something I really liked, which was a traineeship at the time in the European headquarters of the car manufacturer Nissan.
Mm.
So that was a great opportunity because it was, setting a foot in the organization, and also, although based in Paris, the working language was French.
Mm.
Sorry, was English. So that was really enjoyable. And yeah, I think that was a strategy that paid off because from being a trainee, I secured a job and another one, and came back for maternity leave cover, and slowly started making my way up in the organization until one day, because I was quite vocal about the fact that I love the UK. And when I say one day, this is maybe like, I think, 5 years later or 4 years after starting there, an opportunity arose to start a job in the UK. My boss said, "Oh, do you want to come over?" I said, "Of course." And yeah, the rest is history. So very grateful about how things panned out.
And it's really interesting to hear about, yeah, those kind of career decisions you made and what influenced them. Because as you said, you had this kind of wider goal, I guess, of wanting to come back and live and work in the UK. And I think I'm right in saying that your job roles have been quite different, haven't they, in terms of what you started doing versus what you're doing now with Multiverse.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I think when you start off, possibilities are endless, and I think
Mm.
as a fresh graduate or even as a junior worker, you're not really aware of what you really want. So it took a bit of exploring and really finding my own path. And I'm very grateful that I've had the opportunity to work on, projects and in teams that I was really um, happy to do. And that was all extremely interesting. But I think it wasn't years after years, I figured that it was all super interesting, but maybe not what I wanted to do,
Mm.
forever, or not something that was at the core of my values. So, yeah, it really took we're talking years actually
Mm.
of reflections and really trying to work out what it is I really want to do, what do I want to achieve midterm, long term, and yeah, going from the automotive industry to finance to later on education.
Yeah, and as you say, it's such a good example of those kind of more non-linear career pathways, which, to be honest, is kind of most people's careers. As you mentioned, you start off with these endless possibilities, and gradually through kind of reflection and experimentation, you kind of get to those points. What have maybe been some of those light bulb moments for you? That made you kind of get a clearer idea of, oh, actually, this is the change of direction I'm looking, or I feel like I'm taking the right direction now.
I think the biggest one, and maybe this is a bit of a cliche, but probably was the pandemic. Thinking,
Mm.
okay, well, don't hold up on your plans, because I was always like, okay, maybe I'll just explore this and I'll consider that later. And at this point, I thought, okay, no, you really have to live the life you want to live, because who knows what can happen tomorrow, right? So I think that really was the thing that um, yeah, propelled my decision to more actively search. But also before that, in my reflection journey, whilst I was working, I thought, okay, what do I want? Or I feel like I would be interested in education. So in parallel to my day-to-day work, I was working some evenings and some weekends as a tutor for a London college. So that was a really good way to experiment and see how I was feeling. Like, is this a true intuition? Like, do I actually enjoy education and teaching, or what can I get out of this experience? So yeah, again, we are back with the non-linearity kind of topic, but yeah, this is how it panned out.
And how does that sort of manifest itself in your current role at Multiverse? I believe you've just started or about to start a new role at the organisation.
Yeah, so I just started the new role I was talking about at the very beginning, but that's fresh from Monday last week.
Okay.
Before that, I actually got into Multiverse as a coach. So as you can see, and as you can imagine, there was a direct, I directly benefited from that experiment side activity of tutoring. I got to use it as a coach at Multiverse, and it facilitated the transition. And in fact, that coach role at Multiverse was just the perfect blend of what I love, because I was coaching and tutoring on project management, which I had been doing for 10 years prior. So these project management skills combined with the whole tutoring ones, just led me to a path I would have never thought about like 10 years ago. So turned out well.
Yeah, and as you say, that connectivity, between the degree, because I think so often, we hear students and graduates talk about, I want to do something connected to my degree, or kind of worrying that maybe doing something totally different is closing doors. But as you say, you were able to bring in all of that international business and project management, but kind of be able to apply it in quite a different way. So it's really interesting to hear you talk about that.
Yeah, and I see it as building blocks, and every experiences you can never really tell, I think, how you're going to leverage a given experience later in time. It could be a contact, it could be I used to work as a freelancer, and we had a set of clients, some of which I found again amongst the people I was coaching. So yeah, sometimes it doesn't, what you gather in your experience doesn't always come in the most obvious way, but there is always something to grab for later.
Absolutely. I mean, you mentioned about contacts there, particularly. I think when we've talked previously, you've mentioned about maybe significant people that have had an impact within your career. So I wondered whether you might be able to talk to us a little bit about that. Have there been any kind of key figures, I guess, throughout your career so far who've kind of helped maybe kind of steer you along the path, or have maybe offered that support when you've had those light bulb moments or changes you've wanted to make?
Yeah, so I think the first chronologically that comes in mind actually is somebody who was, I think he was our head of program at Huddersfield, Damian Casselli, whom I feel really fortunate to still have in my life. We're still in touch, and this is brilliant because he was really supportive at the time, and really gave the student in me and the French student in me the confidence that I could achieve what I wanted to achieve, and he has been doing it all throughout this year. So this is one thing, and then I guess throughout my career I have been I've had the chance to have like fantastic managers. It was not every single one of them, but for the most part, really brilliant people. And again, like some people to shout out. I had somebody who was a colleague at a point, Karian, who later on, brought me into her team via another manager of mine, Chris, who then later on gave me access to a line of work that I would have never thought I would get to have access to, which was around diversity and inclusion. And somebody else made a really strong impact. David Parkinson in Nissan, who through mentoring and enabling me really to explore a variety of projects, brought me into his team and supported my career growth and development. So yeah, really really strong figures and mentors that I'm really proud to and happy to have like cross paths with.
It's great. Such a great network, as you said, you've sort of kind of created throughout your career. And I really like the analogy of building blocks. I think it sounds like that with the people you've met as well, each one of them kind of adding to different sort of aspects of your career. I wonder, just before we move on to your underrated careers advice, just to kind of come back to what you were saying, I suppose, about being an international student and being someone who's kind of worked internationally and studied internationally. And you mentioned sort of having that support, when you first came to Huddersfield as a French student coming to the UK. How important do you feel that sort of community is as someone kind of internationally coming over to another country and studying in that environment or working in that environment? What have some of the kind of key challenges been, I guess, and what's really helped you throughout your career to kind of manage that global, I guess, work presence?
So am I right thinking that do you mean at the university more specifically or throughout the career?
I guess a bit of both. Yeah, I mean, let's start with the university because I think that's it's a good place to kind of begin. But yeah, be interested from the work perspective as well. As someone who's also worked kind of internationally, but shamefully didn't have to really learn any of the language because of the job I was doing. So not a good example. But yeah, let's start with kind of the university itself. So what was that kind of like? That initial experience, and I guess what really helped you feel, included, I suppose, and kind of be able to get used to that environment very quickly.
Yeah, so I think back to what we were talking earlier, the power of the community really, because it can be a bit disorientated to, and I was coming from France, but I think it could have equally been disorientated for somebody coming from, I don't know, Wales to Huddersfield. Like, your friends aren't there, your family isn't there, your usual support system isn't anymore. So getting to kind of like find your tribe and, find your crowd, like, and just get to meet people with whom you share values and interests. And I ended up just having a large group of friends who were coming from Pakistan. They've never had like a French friend, and yeah, we just ganged up over common interest and values. So getting to create this support system, I think, is really important, and those friendships you carry out later in life as well, and in the sort of work that you do, like thinking of course, professional contact and professional networking, but at the core of it is those people are also cheerleaders, and they are confidence boosters, and they are people that can, support you through thick and thin. So, so yeah, I think those would be one of the most important thing in my perspective.
Yeah, it's such an important point about community, and I think reflected by a lot of international students or people who've worked internationally. I mean, do you feel sort of there's been an advantage to you throughout your career from having kind of, I guess, worked across different countries and with quite a variety of sort of stakeholders from across the world? Do you feel it's kind of been quite helpful in terms of some of the aspects of the work that you do now?
Oh, I think it does, because more holistically, it is about understanding how vulnerable can people feel. So this vulnerability can come from different places, but I guess having having lived in different places, you kind of know what it feels to be taken out of your comfort zone, and that could be for geographical reason, but that could also be because, I don't know, I'm thinking of the line of work I'm doing now, but it could be because you have, I don't know, a hearing impairment or disability, or because you are neurodivergent. So that sense of building empathy and yeah, uh, sympathizing with people who might feel vulnerable for a variety of reasons is something that has helped a lot.
Well, it's like you said earlier, isn't it? That sort of that understanding people is such a universal thing. Whether you're coming from a completely different part of the world or from another part of the country that might be quite different. It's that sort of understanding of people and how to kind of empathize and resonate with people. It's really, really useful to hear that. So amazing reflection so far, Anna-Line. We could talk about all this stuff all day. It's absolutely brilliant. But it is time to move on to our final section of the podcast, which is our underrated careers advice. So each week we ask our guests to kind of provide some advice that you might not typically find necessarily on LinkedIn posts or inspirational quotes, but things that have kind of personally sort of helped you throughout your career. So do you have some underrated careers advice for any other University of Huddersfield graduates or current students that you might want to share?
So I think the best advice that I've been told, it's more of a reflection, and actually it might be something you eventually find on LinkedIn now, because a lot of things are said there. But
we're not that anti-LinkedIn, it's okay.
But somebody said to me, one of the managers said to me, you don't hire the people for who they are already, but for what they can become. And, as somebody, like a lot of people who might be struggling with imposter syndrome and this kind of stuff, that was really relaxing, in the sense that it's all about growth mindset and thinking of, okay, what do I have the capacity of doing? And it's not about overthinking of, oh, but I can't do this and that, but no, I can do this list of things, and that's going to bring me in that place in however many months or years time. So that was I thought that was a really powerful advice, and certainly something I like to share, because too often people are too focused on looking at job description, thinking, oh, but I don't match every single thing. But just reflect and think of, okay, what can you do? What is in your power to do to get to where you want to go, and what can you leverage as existing skills? That would be my reflection.
No, great advice. And I think, we talk a lot sort of within the career service about, hiring on potential, as so many employers do, as you talked about, but also, that idea of, the 60 or 70% rule. If you're looking at a job description, don't be put off if you don't hit 100%. Are you hitting 60 or 70%? Are those kind of some of the key features of the job? And have you got other things you could bring that they haven't even talked about? So, I think it's such a good point to make. And very good underrated advice. I've not seen exactly that advice on LinkedIn. So I think you're in the clear for now, which is good. So fantastic. Well, unfortunately, we're reaching the end of the podcast. So been some brilliant reflections and insights, Anna-Line. Thanks so much for taking your time to be with us. If people have listened to this and are maybe interested in connecting with you, sort of in the online space, what's the best way for them to kind of find you and get in touch?
Well, we mentioned LinkedIn, so do add me on LinkedIn, drop a message. I would be more than happy to help anyone from Huddersfield and beyond. So
Fantastic. We'll make sure to share those details on the screen. Hopefully you'll see them on the screen in front of you when you're watching this. But for now, that kind of brings us really nicely to the end of the podcast. Anna-Line, thanks so much for joining us. Thanks for kind of taking the time to be another member of the Hud Grad Club. And we hope you have a great time in your new role.
Thank you so much, Chris.
Fantastic. À bientôt.
À bientôt.
Enjoyed the podcast? Then go to the University of Huddersfield YouTube channel for all of our future episodes. Subscribe, like, and don't forget to hit the bell button for notifications. If you'd like to be involved in the Hud Grad Club podcast moving forward, please get in touch with us on alumni@hud.ac.uk.